Hello, everyone. Welcome back. It's a true honor for me to moderate this panel. You joined this conversation not because you want to talk about climate or innovation, no. You are here because you know that the reason of being for Europe is at stake. So to make sure that you are with us, I'm going to ask you a question and a little exercise. Please stand up if you believe that Europe, reason of being, is at risk. Please stand up. Thank you. And I want to make sure that every voice is heard. So now I'm going to ask the one that believe that it is a unique opportunity for Europe. Please stand up. Thank you. Well, guess what? In every great challenge lies great opportunities. We know that, right? I see nuts here. Well, today we grew up in a world where peace was a given, where cooperation and prosperity were part of the promises. But we know that today it is being challenged. The US is rewriting the rules of the trade. China is really good at exporting their industrial assets. So what is the role of Europe in all that? Guess what? If we don't act, we may be irrelevant in the next economy. Because we are believing today that setting standards will make us competitive. Well, guess what? It is not. So it's a unique wake-up call, and this is what our panel is about. So I'm going to introduce you to our first speaker, an incredible leader that we are very honored to have on stage. Because the question is not how we fail, but how do we go back up? This is the question for Europe, right? And as Ursula von der Leyen would say, this is a time to invest in our future, in green tech and innovation, and make Europe the home of it. So this is why we are here today, to explore how do we go back up, how do we invest, how do we de-risk innovation, how do we make sure that our voice is heard in this geopolitical fragmentation. Because hope is not a strategy. And today, sovereignty is about the choosing the future we want to build for Europe. So without further ado, let me introduce our first keynote speaker, someone who I deeply respect for his work, Pierre Haski, journalist and president of Reporter Without Frontières. Pierre.
Good afternoon, everybody. I don't know if you hear me well. Okay. When this building was inaugurated, it was for the World Exhibition of 1900. The President of the United States was named William McKinley. He's a hero of Donald Trump, as we all know, and he was a great fan of tariffs. So I don't know if that is a good or a bad omen for our meeting. All I know is that this is a great place, and I'm very happy to be with you today. In my job as editorialist in the morning program of the French public radio, France Inter, Donald Trump has been an obsessive figure since day one. Not only for me, but for most people I meet and who look for explanations or making sense of what's going on. On January 20th, the day of the inauguration of Donald Trump, I started my editorial with these words: "We are entering a new world today, literally." When I wrote that, I wasn't sure I was not exaggerating. But the next few weeks until today proved that this was indeed the case, for better or for worse. With this key question, what are we experiencing in the world today? And what does it mean for us in France, in Europe, or anywhere in the world? I usually point to a little noticed speech made on January 19, the day before the inauguration, by Marco Rubio, the now Secretary of State of the Trump administration. Rubio was that day in the Senate. He was for his confirmation hearing, and he made this statement. I quote Marco Rubio: "The post-war global order is not just obsolete, it's now a weapon used against us. And all this has led to a moment in which we now confront the single greatest risk of geopolitical instability and of generational global crisis in the lifetime of anyone alive and in this room today. 8 decades later, we are once again called to create a free world out of the chaos, and this will not be easy." End of quote, Marco Rubio, January 19. I think this statement says it all. The global order he was referring to was born out of the Second World War. It was shaped and led by the US and its allies, including Western Europe. It was getting increasingly questioned by a number of actors. Countries in the global south who were still under colonial rule when that order came out and are still underrepresented today. The UN Security Council is still representing the world of 1945, not the world of the 21st century. It's proved impossible to change as it requires a consensus. It's also opposed by China and Russia, two big powers who resent the US-led order that was created at that time, and they want to change it. But until recently, the US and its allies were defending that order. They were ready to accept minor changes, but nothing more than that. And here comes Donald Trump, who joins those who want to create a new world order, but with a twist. As Marco Rubio said on January 19, putting the US core national interests above all else. No more friends, no more allies, America first. This leaves Europe stunned and shocked. We are the village of Asterix of post-war global order. You know Asterix, this fictional character who has become our national symbol. He comes from a small village, which is the last one to resist the mighty Roman Empire. But the major difference between Asterix and Europe is that Asterix has a magic potion, which give him supernatural powers that the Romans can't match. Europe is still looking for the magic potion, and Trump knows this. This is a major challenge, but also an opportunity to Europe. I saw the way you voted at the beginning of this session. We mostly see, for the moment, the challenging part, not the opportunities. The challenging part, one, the fate of Ukraine, which hangs in the balance with a US administration that speaks the language of the invaders. Second, the collective security of the continent, which we have too long left in the hands of the United States through NATO, to find ourselves vulnerable and fragile when they turn their back on us. This is something we in France have some difficulty to understand. General de Gaulle has convinced us in France that the ultimate defense of the country is in the hands of our own president, who has the power with the nuclear deterrent. But this is a unique position in Europe. Other countries in the European Union don't have that capacity. Whether you are mighty Germany or small Lithuania, the ultimate defense of your country is in the hands of the President of the United States through NATO. And it makes a hell of a difference when that president is, to say the least, unpredictable. Thirdly, Europe finds itself under siege for its model. Digital regulation, cultural exception, climate policies, diversity and gender equality preferences, all these policy choices are under attack. French companies were shocked when they received a letter from the US Embassy in Paris soon after the change of administration, requesting them to comply with the Trump administration ban on diversity, equity, and inclusion programs if they still want contracts with the US government. Same for the so-called cultural exception. Hollywood and the digital platforms have asked the administration to protect them against European regulations. And the US administration has produced a memorandum promising to defend US companies against what they call discriminatory policies, particularly in Europe, of course. And yesterday, the US administration reacted to the EU imposing fines on Apple and Meta for not complying with EU regulations, and it described it as extortion. This announces a major battle. Vice President J.D. Vance of the US is close to Silicon Valley barons, and he is at the forefront of that battle. Climate is also obviously a major difference. President Trump is tearing apart any legacy from his predecessors, from exiting the Paris Agreement once again, for diminishing regulations to oil and gas exploration and production, drill, baby drill, you remember his opening speech, promoting coal, and getting Elon Musk and his Doge to reduce dramatically all the departments involved in environment issues, even resorting to Orwellian methods of erasing databases and websites that refer to climate policies. Add to that pressures on foreign countries, particularly in Europe, to increase their consumption of US liquefied natural gas as part of the administration's trade wars. Europe is at a crossroads. I said earlier that it has challenges and opportunities. We've seen the challenges, now the opportunities. There are two distinct questions. One, what should Europe do? And secondly, more difficult, what can it achieve? I strongly believe that Europe has the capacity and the resources to overcome the onslaught on its model, but on conditions. First of all, let's recognize, as French sociologist Dominique Méda wrote in Le Monde recently, that, I quote, Europe has all of a sudden become a familiar, reassuring, and protective presence. This is very paradoxical, and we must thank Trump for that. For years, the EU has been decried. The UK even voted for Brexit. The rise of Eurosceptic or even anti-European parties was becoming the norm. All this has not disappeared overnight, of course. But pan-European polls show that a vast majority of Europeans today support the EU and certainly don't want it to disintegrate or even lose substance. On the contrary, on defense, for example, Europeans are even more integrationists as their leaders. A large majority is in favor of a European army, although there's no such proposal on the table. But what it means is that Europeans can get their act together and the European can come out of the current turmoil with a stronger sense of what it is, of what it was created for, and what it aspires to become over time. For that to happen, it certainly needs, first of all, to remain united. Since Trump started his assault on the EU, most European leaders have generally shown a high level of responsibility, more than I expected, to be honest, having followed EU affairs for decades. We even had the great surprise of hearing Friedrich Merz, the next German Chancellor, traditionally an ardent defender of the transatlantic relation, say on the night of his election that Germany should be independent, that's his word, from the United States. He even said he never thought he would say that one day. He'll become Chancellor in 10 days' time, and he announced that his first trips will be to Paris and Warsaw, the two countries of the Weimar Triangle with Germany. When we must add to that the United Kingdom, which has come out of the cold. Secondly, Europe will have to be smart. It's not ready to defend itself alone, and it will take, according to experts, up to 5 years to be able to defend itself without the United States, to have a real European defense. Therefore, it needs to prepare itself for the inevitable without making it happen too soon. Thirdly, and that's the most tricky part, it must defend its model. Otherwise, it will not be worth defending. We often use the word values. It's common in our policy speech by politicians or by everybody, journalists as well. But it's sometimes a mantra that has lost any substance. What are those values? And what new consensus can we build across the continent on what makes us Europeans? Judging by some of the postures of politicians in France or elsewhere, we're not yet there. We haven't even started yet, beyond the fact that we are not Trump's America. That's not good enough, even if it's a new beginning, as Trump is becoming an anti-model. This has not discouraged Europe's mini-Trumps from trying out, but I have the feeling that the US president is not helping them with his chaotic management. Europe can be a world leader if it offers an alternative to the strongman, authoritarian, jingoist leadership we see arising across the world, including in the US. This may sound counterintuitive, as the world hasn't reached yet the peak populism or peak authoritarianism in the world. But if you look beyond the current chaos, someone has to offer an alternative, and Europe could be that continent. Not alone. The EU should engage with other parts of the world to prepare the ground for a different world order, particularly countries from the global south who don't necessarily want to choose between Trump's hegemony or Chinese and Russian-led world orders. Trump allows us to break away from the West versus the rest mentality, which was threatening to isolate us, not them. This is a cultural revolution for many Europeans who have been raised with US-centric world and will find it difficult to make too big a change. But without a new paradigm in relations with Africa or Latin America, Europe will not be able to be heard. But for that to happen, Europe must defend some of its achievements. As president of Reporters Without Borders, I see European nations, particularly the Nordic ones, come out every year on top of the World Freedom Index that we publish. The next one comes out next week and should confirm that trend. But it should also confirm the increasing worries we have about the quality of those freedoms, about the respect for the rule of law, the separation of power, the accountability. We cannot be complacent or take comfort from the fact that it's worse elsewhere. And Europe should remain focused on climate issues in the world that is going back on all its commitments. 10 years ago, the Paris Climate Agreement was an achievement of diplomacy and civil society advocacy. But the decade since then has been dramatically disappointing. The EU has produced its own Green Deal with objectives that are more advanced than most of the world, but we shouldn't be satisfied with this relative advantage. And there are many dangerous clouds at present that take advantage of what is going on in the US, with the US backtracking on every commitment, to push for the same to happen here, for competitiveness or under the pretext of fighting bureaucracy. A few years ago, at our radio, we received a call from some French experts on the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. They wanted to talk to us urgently. They could not understand how the media had made front-page headlines on their most recent report, which was predicting a climate disaster unless strong measures were taken urgently. And then the world went on with business as usual the next day. They told us they could not sleep at night. We discussed with them to improve our information system on climate issues. But looking at the world today, particularly with climate skeptics now in power in Washington, I don't think they have recovered sleep. That's where Europe should make a difference. Can it? It's a huge question mark. And I think civil societies should be active actors to keep our governments and companies focused on these existential issues. Europe can recover its long-lost leadership if it shows it can become a power that makes itself respected and its citizens protected, but also reinvent its democratic and social model and remain committed to saving the planet. This is a huge agenda. But in the global chaos of the world, it's not enough to survive. It's also necessary to give citizens reasons to hope and struggle for. In a time of conflicting empires, we'll become adults or vassals. Thank you.
I was like, thank you so much, Pierre. Now I'm going to welcome the next panel. It's my very honor to welcome on stage Bruno Bonnel, the General Secretary of France 2030. Please, Bruno, welcome. Welcome on stage Shiva Dustdar from the European Investment Bank, the world's largest climate bank of the European Union. And please, warm welcome to Mikael Nordlander from Vattenfall, a company aiming to move fossil fuel. Thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you. So we are here to discuss about the future of Europe. So I'm going to start by asking you one question that is on everybody's mouth, or lips, as we say in English. I don't really know the expression. So maybe, Bruno, you want to start. What is your view on Europe leadership in this current context?
Well, we're living, good evening, everyone. We're living in a very strange world right now where the European leadership used to be economical power in a very wide open world where competition was basically about product with an understanding that the ethical values of business was pretty much even though with China we had some tension. Right now with the attitude of the US especially, everything has been totally moved upside down, and the leadership in Europe is probably more about values now than about products. Meaning that between a world on the Western front where deregulation is at any cost, the famous drill, right? And a world where AI and productivity is going to be really obsession of China. We kind of squeeze in the middle right now. And if we want to emerge from this, it's going to be very important to repeat that the values with an S, and not just the value of what we produce, is going to be critical for the consumer to really distinguish between right and wrong and make the proper decision. So leadership is really about values for me.
I'm going to talk about it later because I don't know if the world is right or wrong. It's going to be challenging. Maybe, Shiva, you want to share your perspective representing also this very important bank for Europe.
Indeed, absolutely. And I would like to build on what Bruno just said. I would say our leadership, the EU leadership, is not only based now on values, but actually putting really the money to where our values are. And I think this is coming from the perspective also of, indeed, the Bank of the European Union, the European Investment Bank, which I think has even a more important role.
This is happening
right now. To ensure, absolutely, that we are doubling down on our, and stay committed Two are climate objectives. So you may have heard of the EIB as the EU Climate Bank, and we are very much committed to remain the climate bank. But of course, there are other priorities that the EU needs to support, such as innovation, digitalization, national security, and all of those need to be obviously as part of a wider package so that we actually can...
Okay, so I see you're confident in Europe putting money where our mouth is. Mikael, what's your opinion on current situation?
While representing the industry, it's very interesting times to try to do business and take decisions in some sort of direction. However, even though there is an increased focus on security and resilience, it doesn't stand really in contrast with the need to handle the climate and competitiveness. I mean, the one thing we know for sure that bridges these three is the energy. And energy today, based mainly on imported fossil energy, we know that we're not competitive there. So basically our view is that the only chance is to stick to the still leading position that Europe has in their ambitions and keep to that. Because what we see as an energy company now is that the industry in their transition plan, one of the biggest fear we hear from them is that the EU will start to hesitate on the direction.
Okay, well, we may think that Europe be in a quite good position in regards to energy. We're going to discuss that. And maybe Shiva or Bruno, the question that everybody's wondering here in the room is on which field, which area EU is competitive, and how can we bring value to the world, if I may say.
Well, I can certainly start. I mean, we are here. It's not a coincidence that change now started here in Europe, in Paris. And I think on climate technologies, we have had a leadership. It was maybe challenged the last few years because there was, of course, and that was good to have a US administration, with the IRA to put a lot of emphasis. But that climate technology leadership, we need to now really go and further nurture, meaning we have those technologies that have gotten some financing early on to be started up. They need to be scaled up, and they need to be scaled up quickly.
And you did, if I remember correctly, the first green bonds, and now everybody's doing it, but you're really inventing new financial mechanisms to serve this innovation. What are you the most proud of?
I think what I'm most proud of, and I think generally the EIB can be most proud of, is that it has always found innovative solutions. I mean, ultimately, in order to finance innovation, you need to continually also innovate the way you finance. And I think here, for those in the crowd who are not aware of all our financial products that are actually allowing companies in early stages of getting patient capital that is coming in before commercial banks come in, that stays longer, that de-risks and crowds in private capital. You are missing out. If you have not heard of those, please do reach out to us. Not only do we have the financing, we also have the advisory services that are providing you guidance on how to best tap into those financial instruments.
So who are basically your clients, or who do you serve? So it's early stage company?
We serve basically companies of all stages, but we do it in different ways. The earlier stage companies, they very often get supported through the funds. You may have heard of the European Investment Fund, who invests as an LP into funds. They are closer to the market, they can do those investments. As companies move into the sort of scale-up phase around Series C, they can get access to EIB's venture debt products, which can be very attractive to scale up their technologies and to basically then find a pathway to commercial banks.
Are they countries where you invest more than others?
What was that?
Are they countries in Europe where you invest more than others?
Well, I mean, I think our aim is to really invest across the board, and that is, I would say,
that's
balance. And thankfully, in Europe, we see innovation coming from all the various member states, but of course there are some that are maybe ahead on clean technologies, others on biotech, but I think there is the distribution is quite broad.
Clean tech, can you share with us your situation?
Yeah, I mean, what you say, Shiva, is that it brings the risks down for the industry, which is an essential thing in scale-up. What we also, I think, have a leading position in still in some cases is the way we can innovate together, the atmosphere for that we have.
Being state-owned helps you?
Not necessarily in itself, but the way we now join forces along the value chains and try to form new projects. I mean, one really concrete example is that we are, in fact, right now, globally leading in Europe when it comes to the transition of the steel sector. We are the only ones who have produced fossil-free steel in Europe so far. And we have been doing that in pilot scale now for a couple of years, and is exactly about to scale up. So this discussion about how to finance that and the role of the public and private is really now essential and crucial to succeed in scale-up.
Private-public partnership. So Bruno, I've always had a question. If I had, I think it's 54 billion, right? 54 billion. If you had 54 billion to invest to build better futures, what would you do?
Well, what I'm doing, what my team is doing, you asked a question about where Europe could take some leadership, right? You have, in this current situation where everything is changing, you have two attitudes from a country perspective. You have the attitude number one, you try to go back in the past. That's what US is doing by an obsessive, an obsession on more cars, more and more and more. Or you have to go for the word better rather than more. So concretely, we're looking for what we call the new frontiers. New frontier are life science. So we put a lot of money in life science, including agriculture and health. We're going really big on decarbonization of the industry, meaning that we can produce with a better way of doing it. 50% of the 54 billion is concretely invested in ventures and in projects for decarbonization of the industry.
Do you invest in projects, so in startups, or do you help also big corporates?
It's about 60% startups or small companies. It's about 20% big companies, and the rest is institutions. Because another big investment that we make now, which I believe is the most important, is the education. We spent 2 billion euros so far in setting up 160 new education centers across the country in hydrogen, nuclear, new agriculture.
Education for kids or adults?
No. Education for everything from early education up to masters or PhDs. Because I believe the biggest strength of Europe moving forward will be the talents. So having a lot of money on the table for talents is key for this leadership that you're mentioning right now, because they're kind of reinventing the way we do things. And we need to have those kind of positive viruses into the companies for the future.
That is so true. We cannot build on yesterday's logic. So we need to build new ways to look at things. And question to you, because we know that it is not so easy. The three of you are changing the system and dream big and act big. When I say act big, it's at that scale, because you're changing the system. What is the biggest challenge you had to overcome to really make the impact and the shift happen?
Let me start, maybe. Ladies first. I would say mindset change, because as Bruno is saying, there is, especially in a situation like this, a tendency to go to your comfort zone, to your, to what you know. And I think the challenge really is, as you're rightly putting it, to actually ensure that you do look to, indeed, that with the mindset is, we have an opportunity here to step out of our comfort zone and go the extra mile into new things, where indeed, if I think of what is happening in the US, the assault on universities, their most prestigious universities, Well, Europe, we can actually attract, first of all our European students who are out there in the US, please have them come back and help. The startups should stay in Europe. We should ensure that they get all the support and really make sure that we are in creating, and I'm seeing also some of the colleagues are working towards that, we make sure that Europe is actually really a single market. So it's not 27 markets, but that our companies, our universities get the full benefit of the 450 million inhabitants.
Together as Europe, and this mindset shift to go to the extra mile. Thank you, Shiva.
I think it's fairly easy to agree on long term where we're heading. Short term is going to be bumpy. We basically have to choose in between inconvenient choices. We could be better in using Europe's different strengths. I mean, for example, as France have vast amounts of renewable and fossil-free electricity, so has Sweden. I mean, what we can do is to, as contribution to the EU, is to go before and use the surplus energy. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but our biggest problem right now is that we have a huge surplus of renewable energy in northern Sweden, which is artificially lower than market prices, more or less. So we cannot long enough for decarbonization projects to come there. And then, of course, the internal market and utilizing that and stimulating demand.
So what does it take, Mikael, to shift the model? One word.
One word. Oh, failed already. Sorry. No, but... Oh, I'll let you use the time.
Thank you, Michael. You asked what was the biggest challenge? Management of time. I think that with the pressure, I would say the 20th century had the pressure of almost like the quarterly result for many companies. Right now it's a little more flexible, but still people want a quick return, especially the private investors, when we're talking about changing things for generations. And when you do such changes, you have to really help people to understand the timing of it. Some of the projects we're financing today won't be made sure probably before another 10, if not 15, if not 20 years. I'm talking here about, for instance, nuclear fusion, which is probably an interesting energy resource for the future, but still in R&D and far from being commercially viable.
This is why you're here, both of you, because we need you to help the courageous leaders of the world to manage time.
Time is key.
It's complex and it's a paradox there, for sure.
And time is on our side.
Yes.
Remember.
Michael.
Yes.
Do you want to go about, so I'm going to ask you another question to give you. So we have here an incredible crowd of change makers ready to, as you saw at the very beginning, we're ready to stand up for Europe as a wake-up call. So what is this called, your call to action to everyone in the audience?
I mean, stay the course. I mean, we cannot really wobble now. This is the time where we need to stay the course long term for a transition. And honestly, the faster the better, I would say.
Thank you, Michael.
I would say take advantage of all the EU financing that is available, that many of which you may not be aware of. So please take advantage, reach out to us and scale and grow and be ambitious.
And Shiva will be available right after this panel, so you can get the contact details directly.
Well, I would say keep the faith, meaning that we have all the reason to stop the process of changing, the rationality of the money, the habits, the routines, the way we do things today. But keeping the faith that another world is possible is going to be a key element of everyone that really wants to make it happen. So it's on purpose that I keep the faith, because sometimes it's something that you can't really define, but it's a deep conviction. And we know that we are in a transformation right now. I would say even a metamorphosis. And we go from this fossil caterpillar to this electric butterfly, So it takes time to learn to fly.
It takes time to learn to fly. And may I build on your 3 points is that I believe that in this moment, you can choose courage or you can choose comforts, but you cannot choose both. So it's up to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Merci. 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 Thank you so much, everyone. So I don't know if they will take the chair off or not. So no, okay. So I am very pleased to welcome on stage our next speaker, Craig Douglas, the co-founder of World Fund, a climate tech venture. Welcome on stage, please.
Have a seat.
Take a seat wherever you want. Here? Okay. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you.
Are you spending the day with us?
Day today, tomorrow morning, and last night as well.
Amazing. We
Yes.
feel so lucky to have you.
Thank you.
I was very impressed when we first met because, you know, sometimes you meet people that have done so many things, have moved mountains, and then you realize that they are so young. You're like, how is this even possible? So anyway, of course, like everyone, I would love to hear your perspective about this current context. What do you think in regards to Europe and the sovereignty of Europe?
Sure, so this has been an increased area of interest, particularly given the current political climate. You know, historically, we've been more worried about well, shall we say, the panda in the room, or the dragon in the room. Now we're much more worried about Uncle Sam in the US, just from an unpredictable. We no longer...
Are you worried?
Worried. We have an unpredictable trading partner, and historically that has not been true for over half a century.
It's true that, I mean, we work a lot with several CEOs around the world, and they are used in those last years to deal with uncertainty,
Yeah.
with a lot of challenges coming their way. You know, we have been experiencing COVID, we have been experiencing the Ukraine war, many things, but we may not have expected also the current geopolitical situation, right?
Quite, yes.
It's about our ability to stay surprised but managing all this. So the question is that also that Christine Lagarde is asking us is, are we able to move fast enough? What is your opinion on this one?
I mean, can we become resilient and entirely independent on every sector, every industry? No. Can we do it in a large proportion of areas? Yes, absolutely. I think we have that opportunity. We have a lot going for us in Europe in that regard. I mentioned in the last panel, you know, we have some of the world's best research institutions. We have more startups in the climate space and in the industrial space founded in Europe than anywhere else in the world. So in terms of
education also.
Sorry?
Education also.
Education,
because,
yes.
you know,
We have the world's
yeah.
best research institutions.
Yes.
We're not necessarily the best at getting the technology out of those institutions and into the real world. So I'm confident that we have a good chance, but there's a lot of work still to be done.
So in your work at the World Fund and beyond, because you are interacting and working with several institutions, think tank, academics, what are you the most proud of when it comes to championing EU?
I mean, the relative amount of cohesive strategy in Europe I really like. The fact that we are always going in the same direction. It might take us a long time, but in terms of what we in Europe are good at is maintaining consistency. And as an investor and as companies setting up in this space, not having things flip from one side to the other is the easiest way to be able to make cohesive plans, cohesive investments, and being able to continue to drive that into the future. And we're seeing this with some of my friends and colleagues in the US. They're now looking back to Europe and being like, maybe we should come back home, or maybe we should move back here, because the regulatory framework, the consistency is just much, much stronger here than it is in the US or elsewhere.
Well, maybe what everyone is wondering in this room, you are an advisor to the EU Commission in regards to energy. So what are the 3 recommendations you would give, or you already gave, to the EU Commission in regard to the sovereignty of Europe?
So for me, the biggest issue for most of the underlying technologies and things that we need, like everything underlying resilience, decarbonization, comes down to energy. Can we get that energy at the lowest price where it is needed? Mentioned in the last panel as well, like we have issues where northern Sweden, huge amounts of power, ridiculously low energy price, yet if I want to use that same electricity in Germany to decarbonize my industrial process, I mean, it costs 3 times the price of the power just to transmit it to Germany, right? That's nuts. So the biggest issue that I think we have at the moment is particularly the electricity and energy grid, and how we're supporting that, how we're funding that, is for me the biggest bottleneck that unlocks almost everything else. Like you can't decarbonize industrial processes without significant electrification, but you're never going to do that economically unless your power price is low enough. And the biggest bottleneck to that at the moment is actually the grid, not generating cheap power. We can generate cheap power, that's not the issue anymore.
So the question I have for you then in EU, how do you manage, having a common vision, purpose, and then how do you enable or empower countries and member states to choose the way forward? Meaning, for instance, the way on technology neutrality. So like France could choose nuclear, Germany hydrogen. So how do we manage this balanced?
I mean, this is the nice thing about having an open market. Different countries can choose different things and things set up. What I would love to see more of is how you interconnect all of them. So the relative connectivity of Europe is more important than what the individual countries' choices are.
Okay, so if you had a magic wand, this is what you would choose?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Make sure that you can deploy as much additional capacity as possible in terms of grids, because if you can do that, then actually the cost of decarbonization decreases across the board. And that is a fundamental difference, a fundamental improvement for everyone.
And in your recommendation to EU Commission, do you think that they are hearing you?
I mean, one of the systems that I sit on, or one of the boards that I sit on there, is transmission and distribution. And it's quite difficult because the historic architecture, how everything works, is not necessarily geared for the current electricity system or the one that's coming. So it's quite a challenge, I have to say, there. And the legislation has always been geared around, we're just going down that line, how different countries do this. Like there was a wonderful document that I was referring to recently. It's 800 pages. It's a summary of the grid regulation. Summary document. It's 800 pages. Right, that's nuts.
Well, there is a point that a lot of people are bringing this to our attention.
Yeah.
Is that Europe is very good at setting regulation standards.
Yeah.
But this is not about helping Europe become competitiveness higher. So how do you manage that?
In this instance, it's more a case of how do you incentivize everyone to create that system? Mm-hmm. And we're still quite a long way away from being able to do that effectively. And
who does it well?
Who does it well?
Yeah.
I mean, in Europe, I was going to say European continent. Actually, the UK is further ahead here than Europe.
Why so? Tell us more about that journey.
Because the way they incentivize these things.
Okay.
So in there, they take a whole systems approach rather than just a very narrow approach. So there, the investors are capable of taking the incentivization for additional grid infrastructure is more taken on a total cost perspective rather than just how do I put hardware in the ground. And it's coming. It's still probably 5-7 years away. That's not soon enough. So learn from others and pick up the pace.
So what would be your call to action to this crowd that is eager to drive the change?
I mean, find things that work economically and deploy them at scale as quickly as possible. In the words of my fellow partner, Tim Schumacher, find solutions that you can sell to climate change deniers, right? Because those are the solutions that can scale today. So find the thing that you think can work today and get your full weight behind it and make it work.
And what does it require as far as leadership to do so?
Yeah, in terms of leadership, you need to be consistent, and particularly on the political side of things. Like, there's too much people changing from one thing to the other.
And do you think that's true only for politics?
No. No, definitely not. But it's most apparent and most influential in politics.
Okay.
So if
politics do play a critical role from your perspective.
Absolutely. Like
Okay.
the right intentions poorly implemented screw people over as well as poor policies. Like, so we've had some great examples historically, like in Germany. Like the original feed-in tariffs, we built up a huge solar industry, and then overnight we killed it, and all of that production went to China. We had some great incentive schemes for encouraging solar or battery energy storage for the solar industry, and they announced the scheme 6 months before it was going to be deployed. And what happened in those 6 months? Nobody installed anything, because they were waiting for the new incentives to come in place. Really well intended, but poorly implemented, nearly killed an industry.
So what would you do to enable us to move with consistency and to avoid this political challenges?
If you're going to announce something, don't announce it that you're going to do it, just do it.
Okay.
The market will react to that, and then be consistent. Be consistent. Be consistent, because people can make investment decisions on consistency. If you change things people don't know and you scare people away, if you make it a consistent approach, anyone can make their decisions based on that.
Thank you so much, Craig. Message is clear. Consistency is required. Thank you. Thank you, Craig. Thank you so much to our dear panelists. We all now have a lot of hope for Europe. Good. We are back. Why? Because we are here, because we believe that it's a wake-up call. As you've seen with the amazing panelists, there are a lot of assets. We just need to focus on what we do best and de-risk innovation together. But I want to share just one word with you. Let's not forget that with leadership comes responsibility. And with responsibility, I believe that prosperity and peace are intertwined. So let's decide on what the future of Europe will look like. Let's make the future of Europe ours. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here at Change Now. Thank you.